Have you ever felt unexpectedly irritated with the person you've spent your life with? It might come as a surprise, but many people over 70 begin to notice a quiet shift in how they see their spouse. Not necessarily because love fades, but because the realities of aging, routine, and unspoken frustrations start bubbling to the surface in ways we rarely talk about. In this video, we're going to unpack 8 subtle but powerful reasons why older adults begin resenting their spouse after 70, and what these signals might actually be trying to tell us. These aren't dramatic or scandalous problems. They're often small, accumulated emotional mismatches that go unspoken for years, even decades. But here's why it matters. Recognizing these emotional undercurrents can help you make sense of your feelings, restore mutual understanding, and bring peace back into the space you share with someone who's been by your side for a long time. So stay with me until the end, because you might discover something that not only makes you feel seen, but helps you see your relationship with clearer eyes than ever before. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. We're building a space here for honest, compassionate, and thoughtful conversations about aging, and you're always welcome. Reason 1, unspoken expectations about retirement. One of the most common sources of hidden resentment after 70 is when retirement unfolds differently for each spouse. For years, many couples look forward to retirement as a golden chapter of freedom, travel, and rest. But what happens when one of you envisions quiet days in the garden, while the other wants to hit the road in an RV? The truth is, we each carry an internal blueprint for how retirement should look. And when your partner doesn't follow that script, it's easy to feel disappointed, even if you never say it out loud. These mismatched expectations don't always lead to open conflict, but they do often lead to subtle disconnection. One partner pulling away, the other wondering why things don't feel quite right anymore. Psychologically, this traces back to what researchers call narrative identity. We all tell ourselves a story about what the future will look like. And when your partner's chapter veers from yours, it can feel like they're rewriting your story without your consent. Take Robert and Linda, both in their early 70s. After retiring, Linda filled her days with volunteer work and community events. While Robert hoped they'd spend more time together at home, he never voiced it, but a quiet resentment started to build every time she left the house with her planner full. This kind of emotional drift doesn't mean your relationship is broken. It means it's asking for a new agreement, one built on the present, not old assumptions. Because after 70, resentment doesn't come from big betrayals. It often comes from the silence between two people with different visions for the same phase of life. Reason 2, lack of emotional renewal. As we move into our later years, there's a quiet shift that often happens in long marriages. We stop renewing the emotional connection. In the early decades, there's always something new. Kids to raise, jobs to juggle, houses to build. Life naturally keeps you engaged with each other, even in the chaos. But after 70, when things finally slow down, you might realize you haven't truly talked in years. Not about logistics or errands or medical appointments, but about dreams, fears, memories, what makes you feel alive. And when that emotional exchange disappears, the relationship can start to feel more like a routine than a bond. Psychologically, this is tied to something known as emotional drift, where people gradually stop sharing vulnerable thoughts and feelings, not because they don't care, but because they assume the other already knows. But the truth is, emotional intimacy doesn't age well on autopilot. Consider Susan and Gerald, both 76. After dinner one night, she asked him out of the blue, "What's one thing you're still curious about in life?" He sat there for a second, then smiled like someone who hadn't been asked a real question in a very long time. That moment reopened something between them. Resentment isn't always loud. Sometimes it grows quietly in the places where we stop being curious about each other. And after 70, the less we renew that emotional bridge, the more likely we are to stand on opposite ends, feeling alone beside the very person we once called home. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's move forward. Reason 3, the weight of past disappointments. By the time you're in your 70s, the past isn't just behind you, it's sitting right beside you in every conversation. Every silence, every memory that resurfaces when you least expect it. And in long-term marriages, one of the most common, yet unspoken sources of resentment is this unhealed wounds from years ago that never truly got closure. Maybe it was a broken promise, a dream that got sacrificed, a season where one carried more than the other, and never really said anything, but never forgot. Psychologists refer to this as accumulated grievance. Over time, small unresolved hurts don't disappear. They calcify. And after 70, with more time and fewer distractions, those old feelings often find their way back to the surface. You might start to feel bitterness, not because something happened recently, but because something happened long ago and never really stopped echoing. Take Robert, 81, who once said, "It's not that I'm mad at her for what she did. It's that she never said sorry. And I never said I needed her to." That's the kind of quiet distance that builds over decades. The danger here is subtle. Instead of addressing the past, we learn to live around it. But that unspoken pain has a way of leaking into the present through irritability, passive comments, or emotional withdrawal. And unless it's named, it becomes a silent third party in the relationship, sitting between two people who once promised to grow old together. So if you feel a heaviness that doesn't match the day-to-day, ask yourself what part of the past might still be asking to be seen. Because without healing, the past doesn't stay in the past. It lingers and it weighs down the love that's still trying to survive. Reason 4, emotional needs start to shift. What many people don't realize is that emotional needs don't stay the same as we age. They evolve, and often in different directions for each partner. After 70, a deep craving for emotional connection, gentleness, and presence tends to surface more than ever. But if one partner is still stuck in the routines of earlier decades, fixing problems instead of listening, offering advice instead of empathy, it can lead to a quiet emotional starvation. It's not about grand gestures anymore. It's about feeling seen in the small moments, being heard without interruption, and knowing someone still wants to understand what's happening inside you. The resentment builds when one partner feels they become invisible, or worse, emotionally irrelevant. Mary, 77, once confided, "He still fixes the sink when it breaks, but he hasn't asked how I'm doing in years." Not really. That disconnect doesn't come from cruelty. Often it comes from not realizing the rules of the emotional game have changed. What used to feel like love, providing, protecting, staying busy, now feels like avoidance or even distance. As needs become more internal, more nuanced, the failure to notice or respond to them starts to feel personal. And over time, that can build into a quiet resentment, not just for what the partner isn't doing, but for not even realizing what's missing. This is one of the most avoidable sources of resentment, yet one of the most common, and it starts with a simple yet rare act. Asking, "How are you really doing lately?" That one question, asked sincerely, can bridge a growing emotional gap. But when it's never asked, that gap only grows. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Reason 5, differing coping styles with aging. As the body changes and health concerns increase, couples often find themselves responding to aging in completely opposite ways. And that contrast can create unexpected tension. Some people become more cautious, wanting to slow down, avoid risk, and preserve what they have. Others become restless, determined to squeeze every drop out of life, while they still can. When one partner wants to take it easy, and the other wants to travel, volunteer, or start new projects, what started as a lifestyle difference becomes an emotional battleground. It's not just about what each person wants to do with their time, it's about what each one is trying to avoid or embrace emotionally. A person who fears decline might retreat into the safety of routine, while the other, fearing regret, might fight for every moment of freedom or meaning. Without communication, each partner sees the other as unsupportive or even selfish, not realizing both are simply trying to make peace with the same difficult reality, just in very different ways. Frank, 82, spent a decade begging his wife to join him on simple road trips, but she resisted, saying she just didn't have the energy. He felt rejected. She felt pressured. Neither of them talked about what they were really afraid of. These coping styles, avoidance versus action, comfort versus challenge, aren't right or wrong, but when left unspoken, they silently fuel resentment. One partner sees the other as boring or uninspired. The other sees their spouse as reckless or unrealistic. And in the gap between those perceptions, love can slowly lose its warmth, replaced by criticism or distance. Couples who navigate this well do one thing others don't. They validate each other's fears and hopes, even when they don't share them. That alone can turn resentment into renewed respect. Reason 6, financial control and unequal spending. After 70, money stops being just about survival. It becomes tied to identity, freedom, and dignity. And in many marriages, this is where quiet wars begin. One spouse may want to spend more freely, enjoy the savings, buy what they've earned, travel, give gifts to grandkids. But the other might worry about running out of money, about being a burden, or about living longer than expected with less than they need. What seems like generosity to one looks like recklessness to the other. What looks like financial wisdom to one feels like control or stinginess to the other. Resentment begins not just because of the money itself, but because of what it represents: autonomy, safety, even power. Carl, 78, shared that his wife would buy things for their adult children without discussing it. It made him feel disrespected. She, on the other hand, felt like he was treating her like a child when he questioned the expenses. These patterns often go unspoken for years. One person keeps quiet to keep the peace, while the other assumes everything's fine. But the pressure builds until a single receipt, a minor investment loss, or a disagreement over a gift to a relative turns into a full-blown argument. In some cases, this spills into passive-aggressive behavior, hiding purchases, keeping separate accounts, or guilt-tripping each other for every dollar spent. The key issue isn't the spending, it's the lack of agreement and the silence around it. When there's no shared vision for how money supports life at this stage, resentment is almost inevitable. Couples who work through this sit down regularly, not just to talk numbers, but to share what financial choices mean to them, what they fear, what they value, what they hope for. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 6 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Reason 7, emotional withdrawal and reduced intimacy. In the earlier years, a relationship might be filled with laughter, daily conversations, small touches, and knowing glances. But after 70, those habits often fade, not because love disappears, but because comfort takes over and routine replaces curiosity. Emotional withdrawal happens gradually. One spouse stops sharing little stories from their day. The other stops asking. Evenings that used to be spent side by side become separate routines in separate rooms. There's no argument, no visible crisis, just a slow, subtle silence that grows thicker by the year. And with emotional distance, physical intimacy usually follows. Not just sex, but the tender things. Holding hands, affectionate teasing, even eye contact. Some pull away out of fear of rejection. Others because of body changes, health issues, or a belief that it doesn't matter anymore. But it does. Lack of intimacy sends an unspoken message you're no longer worth the effort. And that message, repeated daily in small ways, builds resentment like sediment in a pipe until connection feels impossible. Marjorie, 74, said she felt invisible to her husband after he retired. He was always present, always around, but no longer with her. She said, "It's like living with a ghost who used to know me." Many couples assume that this is just how aging works, but it doesn't have to be. Emotional and physical closeness can shift, but they don't need to disappear. The most resilient couples continue learning about each other, surprising each other, and reaching for one another, even after decades. Not out of obligation, but because the heart still needs warmth, even more so when the world feels colder. Reason 8, unresolved grievances that were never spoken. By the time a couple reaches their 70s, they've likely weathered decades of shared history, some of it joyful, some of it quietly painful. And often the things that weren't spoken along the way, the disappointments, the unmet needs, the small betrayals, don't vanish. They settle like dust in the corners of the heart. What starts as not worth the fight or I'll just let it go becomes a slow, silent erosion of trust and affection. Over time, one person might begin to resent how decisions were made, how one gave more than they got, or how their dreams were shelved without ever being acknowledged. It's rarely about one big moment. It's the years of being dismissed in conversation, the vacations that never happened, the career that was sacrificed, the emotional support that wasn't offered when it mattered most. After 70, there's less tolerance for glossing over the past. The mind revisits old crossroads. And when those regrets resurface without having ever been named or healed, they can turn into quiet anger, Not because the other person is cruel, but because the hurt was never allowed out into the light. William, now 81, once admitted that he'd never told his wife how bitter he felt that she dismissed his desire to move to the mountains after retirement. "She didn't even ask why I wanted it," he said. "It's like I didn't count." What he buried as practicality in his 60s became bitterness in his 70s. That's the risk. Suppressed feelings don't dissolve with time, they ferment. And when they're stirred up in later years, they come with the sharpness of all the years they were ignored. But here's what's still possible: healing. With patience, with openness, with even a single honest conversation, many couples begin again. Not from scratch, but with a deeper understanding of what's long needed to be said. Final thoughts. Sir Morning Mornson. Relationships that stretch across decades are layered, complex, and often filled with moments that shaped us in ways we didn't fully understand at the time. And if you're in your 70s or beyond, you've probably learned that love, real love, goes far deeper than the picture-perfect idea we once imagined. Resentment isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with slammed doors or long silences. Sometimes it's quiet, a subtle pulling away, a sense of disconnect that builds over time. But recognizing it is the first step to healing it. So, which of these 8 reasons felt most familiar to you? Which one gave you pause? Maybe it's a nudge toward a conversation you've been putting off. Or maybe it's a reminder that it's never too late to repair what's been strained. Love in later life isn't about perfection. It's about understanding, forgiveness, and a willingness to keep learning about one another. And if this video helped you reflect on your own relationship or brought you a bit of clarity, then we're honored to have shared this time with you. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.